The Mechanic and the Warrior. The acid green sky of Taraxis hung low over the sprawling mining complex, its unnatural hue a constant reminder of the atmospheric processors that made the air barely breathable. Metal walkways crisscrossed between massive industrial structures, their surfaces slick with the perpetual drizzle that fell from chemical clouds. Below, thousands of workers moved like ants through the complex, their forms made small by the towering machinery they served. Nera Vex wiped grease-stained hands on his tattered coveralls, squinting through the haze at the damaged ventilation system he'd been working on for the past 6 hours. His dark hair was pulled back in a utilitarian knot, exposing the pale skin of his face, marred only by a thin scar that ran from his left temple to the corner of his mouth, a souvenir from a machinery malfunction 3 years prior. "Hand me the pulse wrench," he said to his assistant, a young boy no more than 14 who had been assigned to the maintenance crew after his parents died in a mine collapse. The boy, Teller, reached into the toolkit with practiced ease. "Here, but hurry, Nera. Shift rotations in 20 minutes, and you know how the Voraxians get when we're late." Nera nodded grimly. The Voraxian Empire ruled with mechanical precision, and tardiness was treated as rebellion. He'd seen workers beaten for being mere minutes behind schedule. With deft movements born from years of experience, Nera reassembled the ventilation unit, his mind cataloging every part, every connection. It wasn't just skill that made him the most sought-after mechanic in the eastern quadrant of the mining complex. It was his ability to understand machines at an intuitive level, to feel their rhythms, and diagnose problems others couldn't even detect. "All set," he announced, closing the access panel. "Power it up." Teller flipped the switch, and the ventilation system hummed to life with a sound much smoother than before. But as fresh air began circulating, Nera frowned. Something wasn't right. He reached up, holding his palm near one of the exhaust vents, feeling the air quality. "Cut it," he ordered suddenly. "What's wrong?" Teller asked, immediately obeying. Nera pulled a small device from his pocket, a crude air quality sensor he built from scavenged parts. Holding it to the vent, he watched as the readings climbed far beyond acceptable levels. "Neurotoxins," he said, his voice barely audible over the ambient noise of the complex. "They're pumping neurotoxins into the workers' quarters." Teller's eyes widened. But why would they? "Keep productivity high. Keep lifespans short," Nera answered grimly. "Workers who die before retirement age save the Empire pension credits." The realization settled like a stone in his gut. For 3 months, the Eastern Quadrant had reported increasing cases of tremors, memory loss, and respiratory failures. The official explanation was a new strain of mining lung. But this was deliberate poisoning. "We have to report this," Teller whispered. Nera laughed bitterly. "To whom?" "The same overseers who approved it." He carefully removed a small component from the ventilation system, a dispersal module that had no place in a standard air filtration unit. "No, we need evidence, and I'm going to get it to someone who can't ignore it." That evening, after his shift ended, Nera made his way through the crowded worker sectors, the stolen dispersal module hidden beneath his coveralls. The living quarters were little more than stacked metal containers, modified shipping units repurposed as human storage. The corridors between them were narrow, the air stale despite the supposedly advanced ventilation systems. He reached his destination, a small maintenance hub that served as an unofficial gathering place for off-duty workers. Inside, dozens of tired men and women sat on makeshift chairs, sharing the meager rations they'd managed to save or trading for small comforts. At the center of the room stood a tall woman with silver-streaked hair, Dr. Eleni Carr, a former Imperial medical officer who had been reassigned to Taraxis after questioning treatment protocols. Her sharp eyes caught Nera's the moment he entered. "Our resident miracle worker arrives," she called out, her voice carrying a warmth absent from most interactions on Taraxis. "What machine did you resurrect today, Nera?" Instead of answering, he approached her directly, withdrawing the dispersal module from his coveralls. "I need you to analyze the residue in this," he said quietly. "And I need witnesses when you do." Dr. Kerr's expression shifted, recognizing the gravity in his tone. She gestured toward her makeshift medical station in the corner, a folding table with surprisingly sophisticated equipment she'd smuggled piece by piece from the medical bay. Word spread quickly. By the time Dr. Kerr had completed her analysis, nearly 50 workers had gathered around them, voices hushed but faces tense with anticipation. "It's a synthetic neurotoxin," she confirmed, her voice clinical but her hands shaking slightly. "Specifically designed to cause neurological degeneration over a 6 to 8 month period. It would appear as natural illness to anyone without specialized equipment." A murmur ran through the crowd. "Where did you find this?" Dr. Kerr asked. "Ventilation system for the Eastern Quadrant," Nara replied, loud enough for all to hear. "They're killing us slowly, making it look like occupational illness." The silence that followed was profound, heavy with the weight of betrayal. These people already knew they were expendable to the Empire, but to be actively poisoned, it crossed a line many hadn't believed possible. "What do we do?" someone finally asked. Before Nara could respond, the doors to the maintenance hub slammed open. Imperial guards flooded in, their black armor absorbing light, their helmeted faces revealing nothing of the humans beneath. Behind them walked an overseer, his pale blue skin marking him as a pure-blooded Voraxian, his uniform immaculate despite the perpetually dirty environment. "Citizen Nara Vex," the overseer announced, his voice amplified by his collar mic. "You are charged with theft of Imperial property, dissemination of false information, and incitement to rebellion." Nara stood his ground, holding the dispersal module high. "This is your evidence of deliberate poisoning. These people deserve to know they're being murdered for profit." The overseer's six-fingered hand gestured lazily, and the guards moved forward, stunned batons raised. Nara prepared to fight, knowing it was futile but unwilling to go quietly, until Dr. Kerr's hand closed around his wrist. "Don't," she whispered. "Live to fight another day." The next 12 hours passed in a blur of processing centers, sterile corridors, and finally, a cell barely large enough for Nara to lie down. They had taken the dispersal module, of course, and he had no illusions about Dr. Kerr's equipment, surviving a thorough search of the maintenance hub. When they finally came for him again, he was led not to an interrogation room, but through a series of increasingly grand corridors. The utilitarian design of the mining complex gave way to the ornate aesthetics preferred by Voraxian elites, geometric patterns inlaid with precious metals, lighting that shifted to complement the natural skin tones of the ruling species. They brought him to a massive circular chamber dominated by a central platform, the Judgment Arena, where the Empire made examples of those who disrupted the carefully maintained order. Around the circular space, workers had been assembled, hundreds of them, brought from their shifts to witness whatever punishment awaited him. Above, in a floating observation box protected by energy shields, sat Territorial Commander Drazix, the highest-ranking Voraxian on Taraxis. His elongated head was adorned with the ceremonial crest of the Imperial military elite, and his six-fingered hands were adorned with rings denoting his many successful conquests. "Nara Vex," the commander's voice boomed across the arena, translated by systems that rendered his complex Voraxian language into the common tongue. "Your accusations against the Empire are most serious. Do you recant?" Nara looked up at the floating platform, then around at the workers, his people, watching with expressions ranging from hope to fear to resignation. "I do not," he declared. "The Empire is deliberately poisoning workers in the Eastern Quadrant. I found proof in the ventilation systems." A murmur ran through the crowd before guards silenced them with threatening movements. Commander Drazix's upper mouthparts twitched in what passed for amusement among his kind. "Bold claims require bold consequences. You will not be executed. That would be wasteful. Instead, you will be given a chance to prove your conviction." The commander gestured toward the far side of the arena, where a massive door was sliding open. "You have insulted the honor of the Empire. It seems fitting that you face the Empire's honor incarnate." From the shadows emerged a figure that caused an immediate hush to fall over the assembled workers. Even Nara, who prided himself on his composure, felt his blood run cold. She moved with liquid grace despite the armor that encased her form. Black plates that seemed to drink in light rather than reflect it, articulated to allow for fluid movement while providing maximum protection. Her face was concealed behind a helmet of the same material, its faceplate a smooth, reflective surface that showed only the distorted reflection of those who looked upon it. But it wasn't the armor that made Nara's heart race. It was the reputation of the one who wore it. This was Selene, the Empire's most feared assassin and enforcer. Half human, half Phoraxian, she embodied the worst of both species, human adaptability paired with Phoraxian ruthlessness. She had put down rebellion single-handedly on 3 mining worlds. Her preferred method was to kill the leaders in such spectacular fashion that the will to resist crumbled. Citizen Vex has accused the Empire of dishonorable conduct, Commander Drazix announced. Selene will demonstrate the Empire's response to such slander. 2 guards approached Nara, one holding a simple metal rod, a mining tool used to test the stability of rock faces. They thrust it into his hands and pushed him toward the center of the arena. "If you survive for 5 minutes," the commander continued, "your sentence will be commuted to 10 years in the deep mines. If not," he let the implication hang in the air. Nara gripped the metal rod, feeling its weight, a poor weapon against an armored opponent, but better than nothing. Across the arena, Selene stood motionless, waiting for the signal to begin. Even through the reflective faceplate, he could feel her assessing him, calculating the most efficient way to break him. "Begin." Commander Drazix's voice echoed. Selene moved with startling speed, covering half the distance between them before Nara could raise his makeshift weapon. But years in the dangerous mining complexes had honed his reflexes, the ability to react instantly to machinery malfunctions, to dodge falling equipment, to anticipate mechanical failures before they occurred. He sidestepped her initial charge, swinging the rod not at her armored body but at the ground near her feet, forcing her to adjust her trajectory. It bought him mere seconds, but in those seconds, his mechanically inclined mind was working, analyzing her armor as he would a complex machine. Every system had vulnerabilities. Every design had compromises. As she came at him again, he noticed it. The slight hesitation in the joint where helmet met torso armor. For maximum mobility, that connection couldn't be rigid. There had to be flexibility. There had to be a weakness. Selene's attacks were precise, measured, designed not for a quick kill but for a prolonged demonstration. Each blow that landed sent shock waves of pain through Nara's body, but he remained focused, waiting for his moment. It came when she executed a spinning kick that would have connected with his head had he not ducked beneath it. As her momentum carried her past him, he saw the gap. The seam where flexible material allowed her head to turn independently of her shoulders. Without hesitation, Nara swung the metal rod with every ounce of strength he possessed, driving it precisely into that gap. The impact reverberated up his arms. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Selene staggered, her fluid movements suddenly jerky and uncoordinated. Her hands rose to her helmet, which now sat at an unnatural angle. The arena fell silent as she collapsed to one knee, then toppled sideways onto the metallic floor. Nara stood over her fallen form, chest heaving, the metal rod still gripped tightly in his hands. He had done the impossible. He had felled the Empire's most perfect weapon with a single, perfectly placed strike. Commander Drazix's voice cut through the silence, rage evident even through the translator. "Guards, secure the prisoner. Medical team to the arena." As guards rushed toward him from all sides, Nara looked up at the assembled workers. Their faces showed shock, yes, but something else too. Something the Empire feared more than any weapon. Hope. The last thing Nara saw before a stunned Baton sent electricity coursing through his body was Dr. Kerr's face in the crowd, a fierce pride in her eyes and her fist pressed to her heart in a gesture he'd never seen before. Then darkness claimed him, and he knew nothing more. A strike that changed everything. Consciousness returned to Nara in waves, each bringing with it a new dimension of pain. First came awareness of his body, bruised, battered, but somehow alive. Then sound, the distant hum of machinery, the drip of water on metal. Finally, sight as he forced his swollen eyes open to near darkness, the only illumination coming from emergency lights that cast everything in a sickly blue glow. He was in a cell, not the standard detention units where troublemakers cooled their heels for a day or two, but something far worse. The walls were bare metal, uninsulated against the cold that permeated the mining planet's deeper levels. A single drain in the center of the floor spoke to the cell's brutal efficiency. No need for sanitation facilities when a high-pressure hose could wash away all evidence of its occupant. Nara recognized where he was from whispered stories. The void cells, reserved for those the Empire wanted to break completely before disposing of them. 57 minutes, a voice said from the shadows. Not a record, but respectable. Nara jerked upright, instantly regretting the sudden movement as pain lanced through his ribs. He squinted, trying to locate the speaker. A figure sat in the corner of the cell, partially obscured by shadows. As his eyes adjusted, details emerged. The distinctive silhouette of Voraxian human hybrid features, blue-tinted skin, several shades paler than pure Voraxians, and eyes that reflected the emergency lighting like a predator's. Selene, without her armor. Instead of the fearsome battle suit, she wore a simple prisoner's jumpsuit similar to his own. Her face, normally hidden behind that expressionless helmet, was now exposed. Angular features that betrayed her mixed heritage, close-cropped silver hair, and most notably, a vicious bruise spreading across her throat and jawline where his blow had landed. 57 minutes is how long you were unconscious, she clarified, her voice raspy from the injury. I've been timing it. There's little else to do here. Nara pressed himself back against the wall, putting as much distance between them as the small cell allowed. Why are you here? Why are we in the same cell? A bitter smile twisted her lips. Because we're both disappointments now. She gestured to the bruise. You damaged my neural implants with that strike. Very precise. The medical team says I'll need at least 2 weeks of rehabilitation before I can return to duty. 2 weeks of uselessness. She leaned forward, and the emergency light illuminated her face more clearly. Do you know what happens to tools that break in the Empire, mechanic? They get discarded. The commander threw me in here as motivation to recover quickly. Nara processed this information, his tactical mind already working despite the pain. The Empire's most elite warrior was temporarily vulnerable, imprisoned alongside him. It made no logical sense, unless Voraxian arrogance was at play. Perhaps they believed Selene, even injured, could easily control him if needed. And me, why am I still alive? He asked cautiously. Public execution is scheduled for the end of the mining cycle. The commander wants maximum attendance. She tilted her head, studying him with clinical detachment. You've become quite the symbol in the last 12 hours. The mechanic who broke the unbreakable. A flood of emotions washed through Nara. Pride, fear, but mostly a grim satisfaction. So the workers know. They saw. They saw, Selene confirmed, something unreadable flickering across her face. Rebellious whispers are spreading through the eastern quadrant. Additional enforcers have been deployed. Nara carefully adjusted his position, taking inventory of his injuries. Bruised ribs, possibly cracked. Lacerations across his back from the stun baton. Nothing that would prevent movement if an opportunity presented itself. Why are you telling me this? He asked. Selene was silent for a long moment. I don't know, she finally admitted, and for the first time, there was genuine confusion in her voice. Since your strike damaged my neural interface, I've been thinking differently. Before Nara could question her further, the cell door slid open. Two guards entered, their faces concealed behind standard-issue helmets, their stun batons already humming with energy. "On your feet, traitor," one ordered. "Command wants you processed before the execution." Nara slowly stood, his eyes never leaving Celine. She remained seated, watching the interaction with that same unreadable expression. As the guards moved to secure him, several things happened in rapid succession. The mining complex's emergency alarms began wailing, a sound Nara recognized from previous industrial accidents. The cell's lighting switched from blue to red, indicating a facility-wide lockdown. And most surprisingly, Celine moved. Despite her injuries, she launched herself from her seated position with deadly grace, catching the first guard by surprise. In one fluid motion, she disarmed him and used his own stun baton to incapacitate both guards before they could call for backup. She stood over their unconscious forms, breathing heavily, the stolen baton still crackling with energy in her hand. "What are you doing?" Nara asked, stunned. "I'm not entirely sure," she answered, looking genuinely perplexed by her own actions. "But I know we need to move. Now." Without waiting for his response, she tossed him the second guard's baton and began stripping them of useful equipment. Access cards, communication devices, and most importantly, a small medical injector that she immediately pressed to her own neck. "Combat stimulant," she explained at Nara's questioning look. "It will keep me functional for about 6 hours before the crash hits." The alarms continued to wail as they moved cautiously into the corridor, which was eerily empty. The emergency lighting cast everything in a bloody glow, creating disorienting shadows. "What's happening?" Nara asked as they made their way toward what he hoped was an exit. "Is this a rescue?" "Did the workers—" "Not a rescue," Celine interrupted, checking a data pad she'd taken from one of the guards. "Industrial sabotage. Multiple system failures in the primary processing plant." Her eyes met his. "Your friends have been busy." Pride swelled in Nara's chest, alongside anxiety for those who must have taken such risks. They navigated through the detention level, encountering minimal resistance as most security personnel had been redirected to the more critical areas of the facility. They reached a maintenance elevator, the kind used to transport equipment rather than people, making it less likely to be monitored during an emergency. Nara quickly bypassed the security protocols, his fingers dancing across the control panel with practiced ease. "Impressive," Celine murmured as the elevator doors slid open. "Just basic maintenance access," Nara replied, stepping inside. "Every machine has its back doors if you know where to look." As the elevator began its ascent, Celine leaned against the wall, her breathing labored despite the stimulant. The bruising on her neck seemed to have darkened, spreading beneath the collar of her jumpsuit. "Why are you helping me?" Nara finally asked the question that had been burning in his mind since she took down the guards. "You're the Empire's perfect weapon, their loyal enforcer." Celine's hand rose to touch the neural implant at the base of her skull, a small metallic protrusion partially hidden by her short hair. "When your strike damaged this, something changed. It's as if I'm seeing through fog that I didn't know was there." Her eyes met his, and for the first time, they held genuine emotion. Confusion, fear, and something like anger. "I served the Empire without question for 15 years. Now, suddenly, I have questions." The elevator shuddered to a halt, and the doors opened onto a service level rarely used by anyone but maintenance crews, a maze of pipes, conduits, and access tunnels that ran beneath the main facilities of the mining complex. "We need to keep moving," Nara said, the tactical part of his mind taking over. "They'll realize you've gone rogue soon, if they haven't already." They made their way through the service level, Nara leading with the confidence of someone who had spent years mapping these forgotten spaces in his mind. Celine followed, her movements still fluid but noticeably strained, as the stimulant fought against her injuries. "Where are we going?" she asked after they had navigated through a particularly complex junction of steam pipes. The scrapyard, Nora replied. It's outside the main security perimeter, but still within the atmospheric dome. We can regroup there, figure out our next move. Celine nodded, then suddenly grabbed his arm, pulling him into a shadowed alcove as a security drone buzzed past the corridor they had been about to enter. Its scanning beam swept the area once, twice, before it moved on to continue its patrol. They're deploying autonomous security, she whispered, her face uncomfortably close to his. Standard protocol during facility-wide emergencies when manpower is diverted. Can they detect us through these walls? Nora asked, gesturing to the metal surrounding them. Not with standard sensors, but they're equipped with thermal imaging. Our body heat will stand out against these cold pipes. Nara thought quickly, his eyes scanning their surroundings. Follow me, he said, leading her toward a section where steam hissed from poorly maintained valve joints. The ambient heat here will mask our signatures. They pressed on, using Nara's knowledge of the facility's infrastructure to avoid detection. Twice more they had to hide from security drones, and once they narrowly avoided a patrol of actual guards. Finally, they reached a massive pressure door that separated the habitation dome from the exterior processing areas. Nara approached the control panel, but before he could begin bypassing it, Celine stopped him. Wait, she said, removing a small device from her stolen equipment, retinal scanner. The guards won't have clearance, but I will. She held the scanner to her eye, and after a moment, the device beeped affirmatively. She pressed it to the control panel, and the pressure door began to cycle open. Perks of being the commander's favorite weapon? Nora asked. Just another leash, she replied tonelessly. The scrapyard sprawled before them. Acres of discarded machinery, failed mining equipment, and the occasional transport vessel deemed too costly to repair. The artificial twilight of the habitat dome gave way to Tyraxis's natural darkness, illuminated only by the acid green glow of the sky and distant industrial lights. They picked their way through mountains of twisted metal, finally finding shelter in the hollowed-out shell of an old atmospheric processor. Inside, they were hidden from casual observation, while still having clear sightlines to potential approach routes. Celine sank down against a wall, the combat stimulant clearly beginning to wane. Her breathing was shallow, and the bruising had spread further, now visible above the collar of her jumpsuit. You need medical attention, Nara observed. What I need is to understand what's happening to me, she countered, her voice tight with pain. 15 years of absolute certainty, absolute loyalty. Now, she gestured vaguely at their surroundings. Now I'm aiding a traitor to the Empire, and can't explain why. Nara studied her for a long moment. The neural implant. What does it do, exactly? Her hand rose again to the metal protrusion at the base of her skull. It enhances combat reflexes, manages pain responses, and, she hesitated, ensures compliance. Mind control, Nara translated. Loyalty reinforcement, she corrected automatically, then frowned. At least, that's what I was told. Nara moved closer, his mechanic's curiosity overwhelming his caution. May I? He asked, gesturing to the implant. After a moment's hesitation, Celine nodded, turning her head to give him better access. Nara carefully examined the device, noting the precision of its integration with her nervous system. This is Imperial medical technology at its finest, he murmured. But there's damage to the housing, a hairline fracture where my strike impacted. He sat back. I think when I hit you, I disrupted whatever control protocols they had running. You're experiencing clarity for the first time in years. Celine processed this information, her expression cycling through disbelief, anger, and finally, a grim acceptance. If what you're saying is true, then everything I've done, all the missions, the executions, the suppressions, wasn't entirely your choice, Nara finished for her. A bitter laugh escaped her. That's a convenient absolution, isn't it? The implant made me do it. Her eyes hardened. But I remember every face, every name, every life I took for the Empire. Before Nera could respond, a distant explosion illuminated the sky above the main complex, followed by the wailing of new alarms. That's the primary ore processor, Nera said, recognizing the location. If it goes critical, half the complex could be compromised. They'll evacuate the command level first, Celine added, professional assessment temporarily overriding her personal crisis. Security will be focused on containing the situation and protecting high-value personnel, which means the workers will be left to fend for themselves. Nara concluded, a familiar anger rising in his chest. Expendable resources. Their eyes met, and in that moment, a wordless understanding passed between them. An unlikely alliance born of crisis and shared rebellion against the system that had used them both, albeit in very different ways. I need to get back in there, Nara said, already rising to his feet. My people need help with evacuation. You'll be shot on sight, Celine pointed out. Not if I have an Imperial Enforcer escort, he countered, looking pointedly at her. Celine stared at him, clearly weighing options in her tactically trained mind. Finally, she nodded. I may not understand why I'm helping you, but I know I can't go back to what I was. She rose unsteadily to her feet. I need proper equipment, though. We can't walk in there with stolen batons and prison jumpsuits. Nara smiled grimly. We're in a scrapyard full of discarded Imperial technology. Give me an hour, and I'll have us both properly equipped. As Nara began sorting through nearby piles of machinery with practiced efficiency, Celine watched him with a mixture of confusion and reluctant admiration. I was sent to break you, she said quietly, to make an example of human defiance. Nara paused in his work, looking back at her. Instead, I broke you free, he replied. Maybe that's a different kind of example. In the distance, another explosion illuminated the toxic sky of Taraxis, bathing them both in momentary, harsh light. A human mechanic and a hybrid warrior, united by a single, perfect strike that had changed everything.